Thank you. And everyone, thank you very much for coming. Tonight is part 2 of the Littleton, Mass Geology with Bill Vales. Tonight we'll concentrate on Prouty Woods, Nashoba Woodlands. I'd like to ask to make sure your microphone is muted. You should have all been admitted by being mute. And please make sure you are still muted, because the background noise, if we're videotaping it, can seem like really bad in the background. But if you have any questions, use the chat feature at the end, and I'll monitor the chat, and I'll be happy to read the question to Bill at the end. So thank you, and thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you, Helen. Hi, my name is Bill Vales, and I'm not a geologist. I'm a hobbyist that's gone a little crazy. And this is our second talk on Littleton, Mass geology. And I decided, instead of just trying to do a Geology 101 class, which quite frankly, you can't do in an hour, okay, that it made more sense to focus on a few areas within our town. And when necessary, I'll pull on various geological terms or techniques or concepts to explain what it is that we're looking at within the town. So my general approach, it's the same as last week, okay? I divided the town into 2 general areas, the east side of town and the west side. On the west side is what we covered last week, which was Oak Hill, Smith property, and the Sanderson Esker in that area. And the east side of town is everything else. But in particular, the Prouty Estate, Nashoba Woodlands, Sarah Doublet, Newtown Woods, and literally everything else. And there's really a lot of lands that are managed through the Littleton conservation sites and other organizations. This is the map which I used from them. And you can see here Oak Hill and Smith conservation land. That's what we covered last week, kind of on the west side of town. And here we are at Prouty Woods, right here, pretty much in the center. We see it right by Long Lake. And then just a little bit to the south, the George and Lucy Yapp conservation land and some adjoining lands, which we're going to be talking about as well. So the features of the Prouty land, Prouty's on the east side of 495. It's about 107 acres, and it's a beautiful area, mixed wooded and fields. It was an estate, and it has about 1,600 foot of frontage on Long Lake, has numerous outbuildings, many stone walls that run all through the property. And it's currently the home of NEF, which is the New England Forestry Foundation, which ironically has some of their big properties not far from where I am now in the White Mountains. So NEF is down there. And geologically, there's not, I have not found any bedrock on Prouty, but it has numerous glacial features. We see drumlins, glacial erratics, kettle ponds, glacial till are some of the obvious things that we will see when we're on Prouty. One thing that Prouty has is expansive views to the northwest into southern New Hampshire, in particular into Mount Monadnock, Pack Monadnocks, and a few places west. And what this allows us to do is to get a sense from the Prouty estate as to some of the larger scale geological erosion that occurred between here and Mount Monadnock. And we'll take a look at some of that. Prouty also represents the drainage divide between the Stony Brook drainage system and the Suasco being the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord River drainage systems. So Prouty pretty much represents a drainage divide for those 2 drainage systems. On top of Wilderness Hill, which is one of the hills or drumlins, more accurately, that make up Prouty, is the Wilderness House, which is used for training and education. And 2 points from last week is that, because we're not going to go over them again, but I will be drawing on them, is the Nashoba Terrain. If you remember, the Nashoba Terrain was one of those large plates that migrated over here under the force of plate tectonics. And Littleton is part of the Nashoba Terrain, and that's still in play in this talk. And then also the Nashoba Formation. And Nashoba Formation is just the rocks that occur in the Nashoba Terrain. And the 9 there is an editing error, and I'm going to have to fire the editor for that. Okay, Prouty Woods Community Forest. This is the estate. It's just a large, beautiful home, maybe right around 1920s, thereabouts. There's other people know the vital statistics of this property better than I. There's a map to the right, just quickly following the cursor. Here's Foster Street in town, coming down by the fire station. Okay, and then we get to Fay Park. We all know where Fay Park is with the gazebo. And there's Prouty Estate, right up there, that large white house. And if we take the road up to Prouty Estate, we're entering the property. And what's interesting, this is some of the views of this has nothing to do with geology other than the beautiful slate roof. And I might say that there is a lot of beautiful slate roof here. And curiously, I wonder where they got the slate from around here. The only slate that I know that was quarried nearby around here was over around Pin Hill, over in Harvard, Mass. The Prouty Estate, this long building here, is a candlepin bowling alley. I could not give this presentation without mentioning that, because I love candlepin bowling alleys or bowling. And they have, this is so New England, it's just crazy. I just hope they maintain it. 2 candlepin bowling alleys made out of hard rock maple. And they had, I believe, wooden pins in there as opposed to the plastic pins the last time I was in there. I believe our daughter actually bowled there, knowing some of the kids that grew up there. Prouty was also, or is also, home to the community farm. They use the large fields behind there for some community farming project. They used to have a chestnut, an American chestnut tree project there that they've since ceased, but they did a lot of good studying about chestnuts and how to try to bring those back. And now they all suffered from the chestnut blight. So here's a better map of the Prouty Estate. So here's the house down here, okay? And this map has a couple different colors going on. So the black and white represents stone walls that go all through the property, okay? All through the property. And you'll notice that there's, they lead from field to field, and there's some very narrow walls and some very wide walls. The wider ones would be for the fields, and the narrow ones would be the pathways from a field to a field. Like, for instance, up here, there's some pathways up here. Okay, and there's a pathway over here. The green are the boundaries of the property, and the red are the trails, the hiking trails through here. And it's not a lot of, this was a family residence, okay? So there were roads that went through there. People drove through there. So it's not a lot of down and dirty hiking, but it's some beautiful walking through there. Things to notice here, there's 2 drumlins. Star Hill and Wilderness Hill. These are 2 drumlins. There's actually a third one, which I'll show you on a third, on an additional map. Star Hill is not part of the Prouty property, but geologically it is. So I don't care about property ownership. And Wilderness Hill is part of the Prouty property, but Canyon drumlin, if you will. Okay. This is just a sample of the lovely walk that you would take up the Wilderness Hill. And you can see here off to the right, it's a gravel road. It's easy walking. There's a few other pathways that would go off to the right there that would take you down the lake. But as you look into the wooded area, you're going to see glacial erratics along the way, glacial till. As I said, you don't see any bedrock. I have not seen any bedrock on the Prouty property. But there are some very neat features. Okay, you get to the top of the Wilderness Hill, which is the drumlin on the Prouty property, and we see this house, the Wilderness House, and it's used for training and training programs, things of that nature. But you turn around and look at this view that you get. My back is now to the Wilderness House, and I'm looking up to Mount Monadnock, okay, 39 miles to the northwest, okay, northwest. I see Mount Watatic over here on the left, nice rounded hump, which happens to be right on 119, okay, pretty much 119. And then I see Route 123 here, and that's kind of a, I had a whole series of pictures I could use here, but these had the points that I wanted to reference. So the views here are very, very expansive, okay, to the northwest. And I would remind you all that one of the things that we always have to remember about, I guess I have my slide later on, is we always have to be aware of compass direction. Okay, I mentioned that last week, and I'm going to mention it again this week, is that whenever you go out into the field, you want to be aware of the compass direction. And in terms of geology, I want to know which way north is, because I want to know which way the glacier came from. Okay, so northwest, pretty much Mount Monadnock, okay, that's towards my northwest. That's the direction the glacier came from towards me. Okay, so understanding direction is very important. This is just another view from Wilderness Hill. I think I went a little bit to the right there. And you can see it's, they have to work on it on top to kind of beat the brush down, because every year it just keeps on coming back. But they've really done a good job maintaining the view and not, you know, really beating the heck out of the vegetation up top. They've really done a good job. Some of the things I had to do when I was putting this together was I wanted to look a little bit at a historic perspective. I had to go back a little bit in time to understand how things looked. So I sought some older maps. I mean, you can see here, these are 1941 vintage. I did get some 1890 odd vintage, but these are all maintained by the U.S. Geological Survey, and they really are a great source. And one of the things I like about this, here's these, what was called in 1941, the Long Pond Brothers. Okay, Long Pond Brothers. And you can see, here's those two drumlins. Okay, the one on Wilderness Hill to the right, and the one over here, of which I'm forgetting the name of it, to the left. But you'll notice here, there's also what appears to be a drumlin to the further right. And I believe that drumlin is Baldwin Hill. Okay, Baldwin Hill. If people are familiar with Littleton, Baldwin Hill would be just a little bit towards Littleton Center, and it's really heavily populated for Littleton. There's a lot of houses that have been dotted all through it, and you can see here back in the 40s that there were quite a number of houses on there. Of course, it's quadruple now. And if we just take this line a little further over, look at this, Nashoba Hill kind of winds up on that line too, roughly speaking. I'm not making any conclusion about this. It's simply an observation. Those are things that, I like to do. But I will note again, and I'll be terribly redundant on this, is northwest is up here. So here's where the ice came from. This is the direction the ice came from, okay? And we have to always think about the ice because the last major geologic activity that occurred that we are looking at now is the ice. Okay, the ice came and the ice left after about 11,500 years ago. It left, but it's the last big thing that's really put its mark on it. And of course, even then we have problems finding things because you have all these trees that are growing up and bushes and stuff like that. But we are able to work through some of that. Now, this particular map I did in Google, I wanted to give a sense of, this is here we are at Wilderness Hill, bottom right of the map. And here we have points to the north. You can see up here, I have the Pack Monadnocks up here, and then I have Mount Monadnock over here at 3165. And notice it's 39.3 miles away. Okay, so I dare say on a clear day from Prouty, I can see 50 miles plus easy. Okay, because I can sometimes very distinctively pick out the hump on Mount Monadnock. And there's Route 123 and there's Mount Watershed over here. Now, more interestingly, we were talking about erosional surfaces. I did a relief view of this map. Now look at the relief of this map. On the right of the relief view, we see we're fairly flat. We're about 110 feet above sea level, and we're approaching sea level as we get towards the East Coast. But we are basically in a erosional plain right here. You can see this erosional plain. It's flat, okay, relatively flat. Okay, now we do go up a little bit here, and this spike here is Mount Barrett. And you can have objects that stick above the plain in an erosional plain if they happen to be harder and more resistant to being eroded. Okay, and that's the case of Mount Barrett. I don't know all the details about the type of rock it is, but my hunch is it's probably pretty hard. And certainly here's Mount Monadnock up here at 31. Well, it says 59, but it's 3165. And that is indeed extremely hard rock. So these tools, by the way, these are standard tools in Google, and they really allow you to see and think about a lot of concepts. Okay, so this is a valuable tool. The relief view was just great, and then being able to put a path on there and get an accurate measurement. Oh, nice. Okay, so I want to remind everyone that the ice that we're talking, this is the same slide that I used last week. We were covered in ice, about 2 miles high of ice. And this ice, extended down to, certainly covered all of Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Long Island, cut across to Ohio and thereabouts, and a lot of ice. And of course, with all this water locked up in the ice, that means the sea level has gone down because the water's locked up in ice. So the shore is further out. So, and you also need to consider that the weight of this ice is pushing down on that ground, okay, to the point that it's measurable, that the ground is actually still bouncing back in what's called isostatic rebound, and that's still occurring today in a measurable sense. Just a few reminders, and we're going to be seeing more of these, that with glaciers come numerous glacial landforms, drumlins, moraines, escards, kettles, lots of moraine. And I'm going to point out right here a kettle pond. Okay. And this is actually a kettle pond with a meltwater channel. And this kettle pond is Long Lake, by the way. And you can see where Wilderness Hill is. This is where we just took our measurements from. And the way that a kettle pond would form is that as the ice is retreating, meaning going back, the ice is getting a bit incompetent and large blocks of ice are breaking off. And those blocks of ice, these are enormous blocks of ice are breaking off, and they're causing depressions in the ground. And some of those depressions may actually break through the aquifer and keep the water rolling, so to speak. Or some of the depressions may not break through the atmosphere and the ice just melts, but it leaves quite a depression, which would give you a kettle hole. Okay, so this is a Kettle Lake, and this meltwater channel, this is actually a delightful hike. This gets you to the other side of Long Lake if you come off of Harwood Road, right at the corner of Harwood and Newtown Road is the trailhead that'll take you in along this meltwater channel. You'll see some beaver activity over there. You get a beautiful view here. Going across. So this is another view of from that vantage point. Oh, actually, no, I take that back. This is from Long Lake. This is from the Prouty property at Long Lake. Okay, and I'm looking across. Here's the tower on Newtown Hill. Okay, here's the tower on Newtown Hill. And this looks like a late winter day. Looks like a nice day. And this looks like the same day, and I was walking down the hill. I should have had those pictures reversed, but you can see as we're walking down the hill. And the walking at Prouty is very, very easy. Very easy. Delightful place. I go there, we'll do some mushrooming there. See a lot of birds. This was a red-tailed hawk that if I could take a picture of a red-tailed hawk using my cell phone, I mean, this thing was like just about in front of me. So I had to throw that in. Spectacle Pond is another kettle pond that's in Littleton and nearby. And Spectacle Pond, I've really gotten to see the spectacles on Spectacle Pond. It's finally dawned on me that these two lobes here, I'm thinking are the part of the glasses that go over the ears. And here's the part that goes on the eyes. That's how I'm viewing this as Spectacle Pond. So Spectacle Pond is a kettle pond. It looks much better in this view than just whizzing by it. It's 50 miles an hour on 119, to be honest with you. Famous kettle ponds in the area, Walden Pond, okay? Sandy Pond in Ayr, Mass is another one, and Cape Cod is dotted with kettle ponds. And as we spoke about last week, when the Nashua River was being formed and the whole Nashua River body system, there was a lot of water, okay, generated in this area. Okay, there was lots of fluvial activity in this area. Okay, so Ayr, Mass actually has been referred to as one of the best collection of glacial meltwater topography in the world. Okay, so that's the general topography in the Ayr. I would extend it to the Ayr, Harvard, Littleton, Bolton, Lancaster area. Just incredible number of structures to look at what the glacial ice did when it was melting. And another view of Wilderness Hill. And you can see Wilderness Hill, it's pretty flat. I mean, erosion over the years, about 400 odd feet. And here's the split of these watersheds here. Here's the Stony Brook watershed. Last week when we were over at Oak Hill, that area of town contributes to the Stony Brook watershed. Now Prouty and points to the east are to the contribute to the Suasco, Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord drainage system. And that's what that is. You see Littleton right up here. And then here's the Assabet River here. Here's the Sudbury River here. And here's the Concord River here. And it's interesting to note that all of these are north flowing rivers, okay? And that was, you know, a function of how they were created during the big melt, so to speak. That's just more of the same. Now, Prouty, you'll find some glacial erratics. I find the big ticket on Prouty is the views, you know, and being able to look at, you know, look out to the northwest of where the ice came from and to see this whole platform that's been eroded between us and Mount Monadnock. It's actually referred to as a penny plain, Penneplain, penny plain. And it's considered to be the final point of erosion. I don't know if there's ever a final point, but that's what the definition said. So it's an area that's been eroded a lot. And indeed we have. We're an old, stable, continental platform, and we've been eroded. Okay, but you will see some beautiful erratics there. This is just a typical old erratic. You can see a lot of mechanical weathering that happened through these joints that have broke up the rock. You even see here a nice little quartz. This looks like a little quartz injection here. But we'll see these as we go through Prouty. Now, a couple nice erratics that I found in Prouty, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to found them, and these are along the lake drive. You have this particular one, and there's a quarter there for scale, and you can see this has some pretty good crystal formations. It's a nice, the type of rock is nice. It has some quartzite in it. I see quartzite over here, feldspar. Those are flecks of white. And of course, there's mica and some hornblende, because remember, we usually have a black mineral, okay, in these granitic type rocks. And that's not to say everything is granite, but granitic type rocks, okay. But then a real neat rock that I found down there is this dark granitic boulder, and it was almost blue in color, actually. And I could identify that as either andesite or sillimanite. And those are common minerals that we would find around here. Now, you have to bear in mind that every boulder we see is a glacial erratic, right? It's been moved by the glacier. That's why we see it. So we have to kind of back up a little bit in where this rock has probably come from, okay? But andesite and sillimanite are minerals that occur around here. They occur around Oak Hill. They occur in Nashoba Terrain, okay? And those minerals occur at depth. They tend to occur between 5-7 miles below the surface when they're formed. And it just happens that andesite and sillimanite are what's called a polymorph. And that's why I didn't have to make up my mind about which of these it was. It could be one or the other. And what a polymorph is are two minerals that have the same chemical makeup, but are arranged atomically differently. The atoms are arranged differently. And the best example I could give of that would be with Superman, right? You have diamond, and then you have graphite, okay? They are chemically the same thing, They just seem to be rearranged differently. And we always needed Superman to grab the graphite and do his thing with it to form a diamond. But that's what a polymorph is. And that's really fairly common. So that's why I was able to say this is either andesite or sillimanite. And what would happen is, let's say that when the andesite forms, let's say that forms at depth, 5 miles, something like that. And let's say in time, so the andesite formed, and then in time it goes deeper. And all of a sudden now that forms into sillimanite. Okay, so you may see some traces of the andesite there, but now it's going to be sillimanite. Okay, so that's the nature of a polymorph. Okay, so that's the end of the Prouty. Not a lot of rocks at Prouty, but it's a beautiful place. And I go there regularly. What a place to grow up. I can't imagine. They had a squash court, 2 candlepin bowling alleys, okay? 107 acres. They had all those animals. They had a tennis court. And then they had this house. Not bad. The house on top of the hill. Not bad. Okay, Nashoba Woodlands. Okay, Nashoba Woodlands, one of my favorite places. Every place I go to around here seems to be my favorite place. But we're looking at 3 of the common things that we see in Nashoba Woodlands right now. One is Fort Rock. To the lower left is a beautiful flower of which I forgot the type.
Lady slipper.
What's the type of this flower? Lady slipper. Thanks, Phil. Lady slipper. And those are out now. And then the beautiful vernal pools, okay, which we see at Nashoba Woodlands, okay. These are just typical scenes from there. Nashoba Woodlands, same map that we used before, but Nashoba Woodlands actually consists of several different properties. It consists of the George and Lucy Yapp conservation land. It also consists of, I think, Sarah Doublet Forest and the Cobb Memorial Forest is part of it, and the Morrison Extension is another part of it too. On the east side of 495, it's 100 acres of land. There you see, I should have just waited for the enumeration rather than to try to remember them. Now there's numerous glacial features that we're going to see on Nashoba Woodlands. And it's an area that I've studied a little bit about here and trying to figure some things out. And there's also numerous bedrock features, some very interesting contact points where 2 different rock types have come together. And there's some incredible examples of folding, rocks that have folded in depth. And there are some extremely interesting northeast to southwest trending ridges that are on the Yapp land. And I remember when I walked this land with Art Lazarus, he pointed those ridges out to me. And I mean, they're pretty dominant in what you see when you're on the Yapp property, but we'll talk a little more about that. Okay, I always go in, I don't know why, creature of habit, but here we are down Newtown Road. This is where I park for the Yapp property. Okay, I park right here. And I will usually go in and I follow the outline of the property and I go over to here because I like seeing all the ridges on the property. And there are a lot of ridges. And these ridges really got me wondering. A couple times I did come into the property from the Pickard Lane over here. Kind of entered in through this way and then went over to the Cobb land. And that was interesting. This is the Lidar map of the Nashoba Woodlands. I don't find the colors as compelling as the Lidar map that I showed you of Oak Hill that my nephew put together. But I think you can see here the tending ridges that are running from a southwest to northeast pattern. And when I say southwest, here's southwest, northeast, up here, and you can see the ridges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, who's to say that before we built all these houses going back down to Littleton Center, there wasn't a whole series of ridges there? And further, who's to say that there isn't a whole series of ridges going down towards Boxborough, right on the other side? But the point that I do want to make here, again, in the interest of redundancy, is that the direction of the ice flow came from the northwest, which is up here. So here's the direction of the ice flow going this way, which is perpendicular to these ridges. Perpendicular to the ridges. Okay, so hold that thought. Okay, the reason I use LiDAR versus satellite views, I mean, both are useful for what you're doing, but boy, LiDAR is just great. It just strips away all the vegetation and you can see the landforms. And that's really very valuable if you're interested in geology. Some bedrock. Bedrock. You want to see some beautiful bedrock. Go to the bedrock off of Newtown Road on the Yapp property. There is beautiful, glacially polished bedrock. Okay, this is all highly glacially polished. You can probably find striations in it, meaning when the ice had just literally scratched across the ice, carrying in it whatever it had in it, grit and dirt and whatnot. But these are spectacular. And I have some beautiful folds that I found in here, which I'll show you later on in my section of folds. But I've spent hours in just looking at the bedrock up here. Go up here, have a cup of coffee, just sit down, look at the bedrock. And it's just incredible. Okay. Here's a view of early spring, and I think this was spring this year, actually. And you get a sense for the Yapp property. I'm coming in from the Yapp side through that way that I showed you, and I had good light. And you can get a sense of of these little ridges. You see highs and low spots in them. They're not big ridges, but they're ridges. You can make them out, and you'll see some glacial erratics. You always see glacial erratics through here. Here's just another, this is from the Shaker Lane side coming in, and you can see here, just tending down a little bit to the right here. And you always see water. There's plenty of vernal pools on this property. I'm always looking at erratics along the way. This was an interesting erratic, which this certainly to me looked like granite because it's all equal size, grain size, but it had some interesting, I call them ghosting flow lines, if you will, of where there was a little bit of flow activity. Something went around here, which is kind of interesting. But everything seems equal size, okay? And I didn't notice because when I get down to look at these things, I get down to look at these things, okay? And, you know, I'll usually bring an eye loupe, and I didn't notice any stretching or compression of the grains. They all just seemed like they formed. So that was interesting. This is walking up to the Cobb property. And Cobb Pond is a nice little pond. I don't, if anyone's never seen it. I think the town is doing some work there to try to do some work with some new wells that they're playing around with. Another neat glacier with erratic rather. What got me here is this kind of looked like a person's face. I start going crazy when I'm walking by myself, but it sort of looked like a person's face with their eyebrow here. And this, of course, is their mouth going back, which is the igneous injection of quartz. Okay, that was quartz, which is actually well-formed quartz, which was pretty neat. Now, when you're looking at erratic boulders, wherever you're walking, take a look at the grain size, okay, the grain size. And you'll notice the grains on this particular rock are quite large, right? Like you can see them with the naked eye, okay? And what caught my eye on here was I could make out grains of feldspar, the white here, the black are biotite mica, which is black mica. You know, we're used to seeing a lot of muscovite mica, but there's equal amounts, if you will, of biotite mica, which is black in color. And I see quartz in here. But the grain size, when you see grain sizes of that, that is referred to as a pegmatite. Okay, when there's large grain sizes. And that means that when that rock cooled, it cooled very slowly. And by cooling very slowly, those minerals had a chance to grow. They had a chance to grow. And that accounts for the large crystal size that we're seeing there. If you saw grains that are very, very small, it probably cooled quickly. Like maybe it was magma that was dumped immediately in the water. Okay, perhaps like the type of volcanism we see going on in the Hawaiian Islands. Okay. This at the Cobb property, I got my slides a little out of order. But at the Cobb property, they had this thing called a Beaver Deceiver there. They have a beaver problem that they're trying to, I guess, relocate some beavers that are being a little bit of a nuisance. So one of the things that beavers like is the sound of the running water. So by quieting the sound, which is what they do with this device, they deaden the sound. They take apart that, they take away that stimulation that beavers like of the running water. Okay. And then they also build a fake lodge. They put up a fake lodge, you know, throw some sticks and stuff on it. And I guess that deceives the beaver, like another beaver is living there. But that's what that little contraption is. This is another a glacial erratic that I found at Prouty. It looked like a rock with a hat on it. But, you know, we talk about contact points. So here's a contact point between very fine grain, maybe basalt, where it's black, or gabbro, where it's black. And this is at the point of contact with one of these big pegmatite boulders, which is that large grained rock that we just saw. So we have mixing of these rocks that are occurring. And you can see here, this is up close, you get a sense with my ski pole. But when you look very closely at these points of contact here, you can actually see a noticeable difference in the size of the grains here versus as you go away from the rock, meaning as the rock cooled, okay? So it is something to observe, okay? Few more erratics. Again, contact points between a fine grain material and a large grain material. This particular point, it looks like a quartzite injection that was put into this rock. And of course, one of the things that tells me is that when you're looking at that rock, one thing you might want to say is, well, which rock is older than the other? Well, whenever something cross cuts something else, that's younger. So that tells me that this rock here, the matrix, if you will, that's older. That's older. And that the younger rock came in. And further, you could, I can't quite look at it here, but you should be able to tell which of these branches of this injection occurred first. You should be able to see which one overlaid the other first. So this is valuable information because what it allows you to do is put together the relative ordering of events. Okay, it doesn't give us an absolute date to say, okay, this happened 359 million years ago, but it gives us a relative order. But we have radiometric dating to give us absolute orders, but that's a talk for another day. Some of these great vernal pools, and again, it shows us these ridges. I'm kind of getting to the ridges. You can see the ridges there. Okay. I have a lot of pictures of folded rocks in here because I've become addicted to folded rocks. Okay, and I found this tremendous picture of the folded rock at the Yapp property. And I probably walked by it 10 times before I stopped there one day and started looking at it. And I started looking through the moss and the lichen. And I started seeing these folds in this rock. Look at the complexity of the folds. I'm just seeing one here. Look at this here. This chevron fold here. Oh boy, look at that there. Look at all the folding over here. This is incredible pressures and forces to bend rock, okay, but not break it. You're bending it, not breaking it. That means that's done in depth. That's done in pressure. If you tried to bend or break rock at the surface at this atmosphere level, it would break. Okay, no question about it. In depth, it does not break. It bends. We see these ridges and swales, Just some other examples of bedrock as we walk through here, but let me get to some of these areas. This is an area of a ridge, and what I found in this ridge here, and these ridges are only about 5 feet high, maybe 5 feet high, and they occur every, I don't know, 100 feet or so. But these seem to be a little bit of bedrock in here. This beautiful piece of schist, you can actually see how this was laid down almost. You can see the layering of this. In fact, this isn't really the bedding of how it was laid down, but it's actually the compression forces that took that rock together when it was in a larger mass and laid everything out and lined everything, and it appears in layers. This is Fort Rock, which is a large piece of, I believe, granite. Now, this rock was always explained to me to be a glacial erratic. Okay, I didn't think it was a glacial erratic, and I'll explain why. Now, this Fort Rock is large. It's as big as 3 or 4 cars. Okay, and it's a great place for kids to play. They go through, they call, they play fort there. And it consists of granite pegmatite that is very coarse, very big crystals. And it sits right on one of these ridges. Note that we're right on one of these ridges here. So that got me thinking when we're right on these ridges here, I said, geez, I wonder if these ridges are all bedrock, And then I said, well, why would bedrock wind up in those positions? So didn't know. And then always thinking of all the water that was around here, you know, moving incredible amounts of material, incredible amounts of rock, you know, how it would be arranging things. But anyway, I noted these ridges. Now, I crawled under Fort Rock, not under Fort Rock, but I kind of did an inventory along the side. Beautiful quartz crystals. This is right at the point that it meets the ground, you know, so it would be great to be able to dig under there a little bit to see what's under there. But I'm not going to do that. Okay, but these are really well-formed quartz crystals. Okay, and they go on for yards. Okay, and these are as big as a $50 for sure. Across the trail from Fort Rock is Foot Rock. I think it's called Foot Rock. I think that's what Bill Brown told me. It was Foot Rock, which is the one in the background. And this nice looking erratic that's out in front here, which happens to be of a different type of rock than the pegmatite of Fort Rock. And we're going to take a look here. Here's Foot Rock. You see, this is a smaller grain size. Okay. And if we look at Fort Rock, it has this larger grain size, much larger grain size. So those are things that you always want to, you know, just look at, just observe. One of the things that I've always do is I'll always draw on resources from, I'll try to use the U.S. Geological Survey. And this came in very handy, and I was very lucky that I was able to get a hold of the Westford Quadrangle, which happens to cover the Yapp property and the Cobb property, Newtown Woods. It happens to cover that. Similarly, I was just as fortunate to get the air quadrangle for Oak Hill last week, which was very useful. So these maps, what they do is they tell you, they're just loaded with information. They give you a few key pictures and they give you a geologic map of the area. Well, I took out the geologic map and I kind of extracted it here to give you a sense of what I'm looking at here. But here's Cobb's Pond. Okay, that's the pond that we were looking at that had the Beaver Deceiver. Now, if you look at the red here, all this red represents bedrock visited by the authors. Okay, so I'm going to take their, you know, if the USGS authors have said that's bedrock, that's good enough for me. That's bedrock. So I use that as kind of a data point that there is a lot of bedrock in here. And it tells me there's some different types of granite. But notice here there's this Andover granite in the pegmatite phase. Okay, Andover granite in the pegmatite phase. And it's up around here. It's mapped over in here. There's a little bit over here. And I'm thinking that that ridge that Fort Rock is actually Andover granite. And matching up the rock, looking at the rock type, it looks fairly close to me. Now, I've made it a point, I'm always very non-committal about identifying anything, but I'm leaning towards that it's Andover granite. You see, the thing is with a glacial erratic, you don't know. You may think you have a glacial erratic, which is a rock that has been transported by ice somewhere. Now, you may see a rock that's as big as a house, and you may think, oh, that's bedrock. Well, no, it's not. It's actually an erratic. It just happens to be big. Okay, so it's very hard to always determine what's bedrock and what's an erratic. But the thing with bedrock is you will tend to see it go for a while in various directions. And when you start becoming aware of how much bedrock it is, what directions it's going in, yeah, you get a sense that that's been here versus transported here through ice. So this is this has been very useful information for me. Now, another map that I use from the U.S. Geological Survey, and this is our stuff. This is our government that produces it, which normally I don't want anything the government produces, but they do good geology. Okay, I will say that. This is the Surficial Geology Map, which this gives me a little more information, not about the bedrock, but about the surface above the bedrock. So it's going to tell me a little bit about how much glacial till is on the surface. Okay, and you can see here thick till, thin till, and it gives me some general things on bedrock outcrops. Okay, just general, like this is bedrock. Okay, if you remember the previous slide told me exactly the type of bedrock it was, meaning right down to, is it granite, is it hornblende, what geologic period was it made in. This is a little more general. You know, we have thick till, thin till. Okay, so that helps me. Okay, so here I am on the Lidar map of Nashoba Woodlands. And I'm thinking the ice comes from the northwest. Okay, the ice comes from the northwest. So it hits these ridges. And let's say here, you see where it says T1? That's time one. So let's say the ice is right up here at time one. The ice happens to act like a big conveyor belt that it's always bringing material down from where it came from. And the material that it brings down is dirt and grit and things of that nature. As the ice is receding, it's going to sit at T1 for a while. And it's just going to continue to dump material there. It's going to continue to dump what it's carrying in the glacier. Well, when the ice starts melting a little bit, it starts going back to T2. And then it does the same thing. And then it'll melt a little more and go back to T3. And every time it sits at a particular position, it's going to be building up those ridges, building up the ridges. And then when the ice is melting a little because it's getting warmer and the ice is receding, it backs up and it continues to back up. Okay, forming these ridges. Well, I had sort of thought about this. And so here's some ideas I came with. Is this bedrock or glacial? You know, I was seeing the bedrock deposits on these ridges. I pointed out where that Andover granite was. And the size of an erratic, it's hard to tell if you have a big boulder or if it's bedrock. And the maps had some problems that not all the bedrock was neatly mapped to ridges. And then I'm always thinking of all the flooding and water that occurred around here, you know, how that's moving rock around. So there's lots of stuff going on. Then one day I'm reading, and I read this article on Daguerre's Moraine Ridges. And I couldn't believe this. I'm reading this, and there's a study going on in southern New Hampshire, just up the road from us, okay? Like 30 miles up the road. And they're studying these weird ridges that they found that look just like this. Okay, and these are called Moraine Ridges. Okay, and what they did is, I'm going a little, I'm out of order. What this person studied, this was a professor out of UNH. They had found these ridges and they thought that they were what was called Daguerre Moraines. Daguerre is the name of the person that first found these types of moraines. And he found them actually in Sweden and Norway. Sweden and Norway. And he found that they tended to be about 3/4 of a mile long, about 98 feet wide, These are the measurements over here on the left. About 5 feet high, which is, and they're about 300 feet apart, about 300 feet apart. And I'm thinking, these roughly look like the spaces I'm dealing with at the Yapp property. So I'm wondering, geez, are they Daguerre Moraines? So I called the guy up. Well, let me get back. So I called the professor up that's doing this study. And he explained to me what they were doing, that they found these odd ridges and that they got the okay, and I'm not looking for the okay to do this at the Yapp property. But they felt that they were these moraine ridges that actually showed a yearly oscillation of where the ice was, and then every year it backed up, okay, about 50 feet. And then each year it backed up and it backed up and it backed up. And what they did to further their hypothesis was they dug in various places along the ridge, and they did along the ridges, I should say, and they did an inventory of the size of the rocks and boulders that they saw, So I'm starting to think that I wonder if we have Daguerre Moraines. Okay. Now I wanted to get the guy down to look at it, but he said to me, yeah, they're probably all over the place. Just keep on studying them. So I'm keeping on studying them. But I'm thinking that, yeah, they may actually be Daguerre Moraines. That's the story on that. Okay. So I want to end this talking about folded rocks at Nashoba Woodlands. I've really gotten into folded rocks. The power that it takes to bend rock and not break it is incredible. I just find it just absolutely unbelievable. I also find folded rocks to be one of the more elegant features in the natural world. They just seem to have a very elegant feature about them. This particular type of rock that you probably walk by and you don't think much about it is actually the start of this, just a little piece of a fold. You can see it. This is in the field at Prouty. I was looking down and I saw this fold and I thought my eyes were coming out of my head, okay, when I thought this. And I spent like 2 or 3 hours on this bedrock on my hands and knees that day looking at this. I find these beautiful folds. These are rocks that are being bent at depth. Okay, they're not breaking, they're being bent at depth. This is on the field right off Newtown Road. Here's another, they're fairly well hidden until you until you find them. And then once you find them, you see them everywhere. Everywhere you go, you're seeing folds. But you see here, these folds here, tight folds. Look at this, and I kind of outlined it here. Okay, and here's a nice fold here. You can see this nested like 3 or 4 different times, nested, and you can see it right here. If you just go up there, Newtown Road, and just look at it, it's really something to behold. This is a little close-up of that, and you can really see the folding. And when you see a fold, when you're lucky enough to get to that hinge point, that you can see the hinge of the fold, that's neat. Okay, that's really neat, because if you weren't seeing the hinge, you can't really tell if things are just bending a little or what's going. But this is the hinge point here. So that's really good. This is along the Morrison Extension Trail. I'll challenge anyone to go find this. It's right on a hard corner on the Morrison Extension Trail. The rock is as big as a car, as long as a car, and just beautiful folding in this rock. You can see it here that this all flowed under pressure. This is the entire rock. fold it under pressure. This is the backside of the rock. You can see it now. Again, you're working backwards because you're working backwards from, the last activity that dropped this thing was the glacier. Okay, so to carry this all the way back to when was that formed? When was the grains in that rock actually just a grain of sand on the ocean floor? I mean, those are questions that you want to know, because whenever you see a rock, it was always something else first. Okay, and you're always trying to answer the question of what was it? What was it? The lime quarry up in Chelmsford, great place to go look at some rocks, and forget town boundaries. Geology doesn't care about town boundaries. This is the town right next to us. This is a lime quarry. Can anyone see the fold here? I saw the fold right away. There's the folds. Okay. They're everywhere when you start looking at them. Folds are everywhere. And then to look at a little more closely at this fold, you can actually see the smaller folding going on inside. Oh, I see some more down here. Every time I look at these things, I see smaller folds within larger folds. This is in Boxborough. This is in gneiss, which is gneiss is one of the higher quality metamorphic rocks. This is a recumbent fold in gneiss. Look at this bent completely over. Here's the hinge point right here. There's no mistaking it. I could probably find more hinge points over here. I could look at these for hours. It's incredible. This is in the same outcrop on, this is over near Route 111 and 495 in Boxborough. This is called tigmatic folding in gneiss. And what happens here is you have two materials that have different viscosity, thickness, if you will. Resistant to flow actually is what viscosity is. And what happens, the material with the higher viscosity tends to do these beautiful tigmatic folds in here. And then some more chevron folds. Look at this. See these chevron folds? I have my quarter over here for size. Those are the chevron folds. I almost need a drum beat, a drum roll for this. This is a rock that somebody took me to in Littleton. This is in Littleton. This is a glacial erratic. So its last journey was from the ice. But look at this. We have the hinge point right here and all these other hinge points. This rock is just I just can't say enough about it. Okay, I think I could go there and talk about this for about 3 hours. Okay, you don't know which way it's oriented. You don't know if it's up or down. I suspect it's schist. Okay, it just looks like schist to me, which means it originated on the ocean floor probably and was brought over here, scraped up, rolled around, bent over, and it turned into this beautiful glacial erratic. Yeah, that's nice. More folds. I had to see this fold this year. I was telling Bill Brown that I just have to get up there. But anyway, here we are, Mount Monadnock. Look at this fold. This is coming up the west side of the mountain. Here's the fold starting out here. This is called the Billings Fold, named after Marlon Billings. And look at the fold here. I don't know, what's that, 800 feet, 500 feet? I don't know. And it's, stacked up on top of one another. I believe Mount Monadnock has been folded like 3 or 4 times, but this fold is just magnificent to see. This is beautiful. And you'll also see, and you get a size of it. Here's Carol over here. Okay, so she's here. And there's the fold. So it's pretty big, pretty big. And you see lots of other signs of stress that occurred to this rock. You see these intrusions here have actually been stretched. You can see they're stretched. In fact, this one here, you can see they're called boudins, like sausage boudins. That's actually been stretched, broken, and turned. Okay, lots of incredible forces, not to mention the folding. So we have the big fold, and then we also have little folds. Look at this little fold that I found. This was in a rock right outside here in the yard. We have lots of different types of rocks. But all these little dots on this rock are garnets. Every single one of these is garnet, with the exception of there's some starlight here, but look at the fold. Look at the fold, and that's in my hand. So this deformation and metamorphism, it can happen at a very small level. It can happen at a very large level, okay? And you just got to look all the time. So that is the end of Nashoba Woodlands, and I'm at 8:10, I believe. So I am all done. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. I'll stay for as long as anyone has any questions.
Good evening, Bill. Can you hear me?
I can. Who are you?
My name is Mike Anderson. My wife and I, Heather and I, live on Goldsmith.
Hey.
First and foremost, thank you so much for this. We enjoyed you, the last time in this one. You talk about folds, and it intrigues us so much. You talk about folds at depth. What depth are we talking about?
Well,
can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So you look at some minerals, for instance, like you look at a garnet. Take a garnet. Garnet, we consider what is called an index material. And what that means is that if a garnet has been made, we know that a garnet is formed at a certain pressure and depth. And we know that through laboratory evaluation. Now, the formation of a garnet, for instance, would be about 5 miles below the surface.
Wow.
So we're talking folding at substantial depth.
No kidding.
Now, when I mentioned before the sillimanite and the, what was the other one? And the sillimanite, that goes even deeper than garnet. That tends to be in the highest metamorphic zone before you would go to pure melting, which would be an igneous rock, okay? So metamorphic doesn't quite go to igneous, okay? Mm-hmm. So the rock still stays fluid, and viscous, okay? And it will actually change its atomic structure in some ways. Atoms get rearranged and things of that nature, but it's very deep. I mean, the depth of some of these rocks, I was looking at the depth of some of the rocks in the Nashoba Terrain for these talks. We were talking depths of 15,000 meters.
Wow.
Yeah. The rock goes pretty deep. But when you think of it, it has to, right? The earth is pretty big.
Yeah, thank you so much. If I may, forgive me, I have a couple more. I'm not trying to take all your time. 2 things. One about Sarah Doublet. Mm-hmm. This may not be part of this discussion, but there's a quarry in Sarah Doublet that we've seen historically. I don't know if if you can comment on the time frame of when that might have been, or
I can take an educated guess on that. I have seen that quarry, the area that was quarried, and of course, when you talk about quarrying areas similar to when we talked about limestone quarrying last week at the Smith property. You're not talking mega operations, enormous operations there. So I'm thinking the quarrying over there was in the 1800s, maybe the 1700s, but that's, I actually have to consider that a guess.
Of course, thank you. And then one last thing, if I may, thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Have you ever considered, maybe as COVID starts to hopefully go away a little more, knock on wood, that leading a tour or a guide of one of these locations, leading a hike, if you will?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. I've done it before. The town had these great events every springtime, hidden treasures, which we would feature different properties each year. And one year we featured Yapp, Prouty, Sarah Doublet, and we'd have various activities, including hikes and whatnot. But we don't need an activity like that to have a hike. So yes, I would be interested in leading a hike through any of these areas. And there are a lot of areas in town, a lot of areas.
All right. I will mute myself again. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this. My wife, we really enjoy these. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, thank you very much.
Yeah, Richard. Okay.
Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's someone in the chat who's asked a question.
Okay.
They want to know, does the folding include a heat element, or is this just force that molds the rocks?
Oh no, it's both heat and pressure. You have these two dynamics working that as things get pushed down underground, you have heat working because things get hotter when they go deeper, but pressure, when you think of, at the surface here, we're at 1 atmosphere, right? When we're at the surface. Well, think about if you go down 1,000 feet in the earth, you got all that weight on top of you. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure. So it's heat and pressure, both of those two components. Okay. Any more?
Bill, does nice mean knee in German?
I don't know if I don't know.
Because it would kind of fit if it did.
Yeah, it might, because what that also has me thinking about is another term called Huggen, Hugen, which I believe is a German term, and I think of that with nice sometimes, but it may be. But that's just another guess.
Is Nagog a kettle pond?
I don't know if it is, and I don't know. You remember one of the things I mentioned last week is what role does man play in changing the environment? I don't know if any digging ever occurred to enlarge Nagog Pond. I really don't know. I don't know. Now, I mean, the size, it certainly could be. It certainly could be. And, you wouldn't go far wrong anywhere in New England when you looked at a pond if you said, that's a kettle pond, okay? Because we were covered by ice and there were lots of pieces of ice breaking off the glacier, forming kettle ponds all around.
Right.
So it may be, it may very well be.
I went to school with Pam Prouty, and she went to public school in Littleton for 4 or 5 years. And they had a party one day, probably 1950 or so, up at the bowling alley.
Well, thank you, Bill. This was really great. I think we have, maybe we should try to do a library hike once COVID is done. I could see, especially Andy, we'll get Andy Curran to lead it because she loves getting out in the woods like that. That might be just perfect.